So many years ago, about the year 2008, 9, somewhere in there, I had the opportunity to travel with a group of other Franciscans to the missions in Papua New Guinea, literally the other side of the world. It was the most amazing experience to get there and to see this missionary territory that at the time had only had the gospel for 50 years. When the Franciscans arrived in the 1950s, they made their ways to the upper highlands where no one had ever gone before. The friars took with them their mass kit, the usual stuff they would use, some picture books, and they headed up to the upper highlands, a treacherous journey up into the high mountains. And there they discovered many tribes that were living in various little villages, and they would go from one village to the next with their picture books and everything that they had. They would take out the picture book and they would use it to learn the language of the people. And once they got the language down, they'd start having conversations with the people about what the people believed and about their culture and so forth. They learned many wonderful things. And as they learned about how they would offer their sacrifice of the pigs to their gods, ancestral gods, and how mean their ancestral gods were, and how they always lived in fear of these gods and so forth, the friars would then explain to them the Catholic faith. And they put very clearly how God so loved them that God became one of them, offered himself in sacrifice, and so forth. And quickly the people said, "This is beautiful. There's actually a God who loves us. This is the truth." And they said, yes. And as they learned the truth, the people would convert in mass amounts. They would spend 2 years catechizing a village before they would wind up baptizing thousands and building chapels. One of the old friars I lived with, when I asked him, "How many chapels did you build in Papua New Guinea?" he said, "I don't know, a few." When I got to Papua New Guinea, I found out he built 17 churches and baptized over 30,000 people. And he never talked about it. It was just what God sent him to do. And they went from village to village, and they made a few mistakes along the way, using their picture book to learn the language. For a long time, they would use a picture of a man with a white beard, and they thought that they were saying, "Our Father who art in heaven." They wound up saying, "Our grandfather who art in heaven." So they had to fix that in the translations as they went along. But as they discovered the culture, they listened to the people where they were at, and they were able to present the gospel to them in such a way that the people responded to the gospel, and it grew. It was so incredible to walk among people who remembered what it was like to be pagans, who remembered what it was like to be living under the oppression of their ancestral gods, and how terrifying that was for them, to walk among people who experienced the joy of the gospel for the first time, and really had great joy. We got to one village, and we had to wait outside the gate. All the villagers were waiting for us. And then all the women came dancing out in this little line. They danced around us. They put the various things over us, and they walked us into the village. Now, in past times, they'd bring you to the chief. But since they came to faith, now they bring you into the chapel, and they bring you to the Blessed Sacrament, because he is now the chief, Jesus Christ. And then you go meet the chief. After you meet Jesus, he's the real chief. Very beautiful cultural things we learned, and how they brought that culture into their lives. There was one funny situation where we were at the cathedral, and so all the altar boys, we have 4 altar service tonight. There was like 10 altar service at the cathedral there. And this little boy walked in, and all the kids cleared out of the way. And then they made a big deal hugging him and telling me, "He takes care of the bishop's pig. He takes care of the bishop's pig." So I looked at the bishop. I said, "He takes care of your pig?" He said, "Yeah, when I got here to the missions, they gave me a pig. I know what to do with it. So I asked his family to take care of my pig. He takes care of my pig." So he's honored by all the villagers, because pigs are money over there. If you want to buy something, you need a pig. You want to get married, you have to give a pig to the family of the woman you want to marry. Just the way things go. Wars have been fought over pigs, just saying. That's a story for another day. But what was beautiful is that they went there and they planted the mustard seed. These friars in the 1950s went to the upper highlands, planted the mustard seed, and now 70 years later, it has grown into this beautiful, beautiful bush, and has welcomed in the people of these different tribes, different languages. Every tribe had its own language. Different tribes, different languages, who no longer looked at each other as enemies, but looked at each other as brothers and sisters baptized into Christ Jesus. So beautiful to see how the faith took root and sprouted so beautifully in this land. Now, some people did take a long time. Father Nick, who was a native of Papua New Guinea, told us how his father was the warrior chief for the chief, and he had to offer the sacrifice of the pigs. He'd have to take the heart of the pig, climb the sacred pole, put the heart of the pig up there, and all this other stuff. And he said, my father was the last one in the village to convert. I said, why? Well, he had 6 wives, and he had to choose one of his wives to be his actual wife. He said, he chose my mother. They always choose the youngest. I said, well, human nature doesn't change wherever you go in the world, I guess. But so beautifully how they came to faith. I think about that today as I'm here in South Grafton. I pulled out the history books, and I went back to 1887 in the history of the parish, when the priest was sent here to build St. James Parish as a mission off of St. Philip's. In 1887, there were only 800 people living in South Grafton. Only 800. Probably a total of maybe 2,000 living in the totality of the Graftons. And yet with only 800 people, I don't know how many of them were Catholic, mostly French-Canadian immigrants and some Irish. They built St. James Parish. And this little mustard seed that was planted grew over these years, this 134 years. The parish blossomed and became a home for so many over the past century, and plus 31 years on top of that, 32 years. This beautiful flowering, 34 years, sorry, my math is real bad today. This beautiful flowering of the seed that was planted that became a home for so many. And we saw also in that first reading today, when the prophet was speaking about how the Lord would plant and the plant would grow, and that if the plant ever becomes withered, that the Lord would restore it. And certainly over the years there was a withering that happened in this beautiful plant here of St. James. And God in his love and his mercy decided that St. James should not wither, but should be restored and refreshed and regrown. And how beautifully St. James again has received that newness of life and has been refreshed by the beautiful grace of God. But we face in our culture, in our times today, a new battle and a new struggle. We who once lived in a very, very Christian world have now come to find ourselves living in a post-Christian culture. Whether it be in our schools, in our government, whether it be in our various places we go, things we go to, we notice that there is a post-Christian experience where it's no longer a Christian culture, Christian values, Christian morals. We find that the culture around us has becoming more and more pagan again, or the term new pagans or neo-paganism. It's a post-Christian culture which is even more difficult to evangelize because they came to know Christ, loved him, grew with him, and then they felt to coldness, lukewarmness, and dismissed Christ. This is happening not just here in the Graftons, it's happening throughout our country and indeed throughout the world. We see a time where there is a new paganism arising and a return to paganistic rituals on so many various levels throughout our world. This is why Pope St. John Paul II, and after him Pope Benedict XVI, called for the new evangelization. John Paul II spoke of it as a new springtime of Christianity, a time for Christians to wake up and realize that the culture has changed. It has moved away from the faith, and it's time to go out into the culture and bring them back to the faith, just like the first missionaries of old did. Just like those missionaries who went to Papua New Guinea, listened to what the people had to say, listened to their experience, and that was able to present the faith in such a way that the people would say, I want that, that's beautiful, that's good, I want that, and embraced it. And so in this new evangelization, It's going out to the new pagans of our world. And I don't mean that in a mean term. It's just the fact of the loss of Christianity. To go out to this new culture that has turned away from Christ. And to bring them the saving message of the gospel. To share the beauty of our faith in such a way that the culture can receive it and respond to it. Perhaps we're dealing with a far more difficult problem than any missionaries in the past ever had to deal with. Because I would say at the heart of the struggle of this culture, the heart of its collapse, is what we call relativism. Relativism is the philosophical position that I can make up my own truth. I can decide for myself what's right and wrong. I decide for myself what's true and not true. No matter what the science says. These are the same people who say follow the science when it's convenient, but when the science shows them something else, well, that's not my truth. And so we live in a very difficult time when people are trying to make up their own truths, and we have to be able to present the truth in such a way that it shatters that false relativistic view of the world that somehow I can create truth, or I can create what's right and wrong. I always find it quite comical when somebody is a relativist and I say to them, well, it's my truth that the money in your wallet belongs to me. And all of a sudden they're not relativists anymore. All of a sudden their truth is their truth, and it's both of our truths. It's their money, not mine. But this is a problem that we'll have to face, to somehow try to present the absolute truth, who is Jesus Christ, to a culture that so easily dismisses truth, no matter how strong the science and the philosophy of truth is behind it. But it is incumbent upon us to go out into this culture, into this time, and to bring the saving message of the gospel. In the days of old, the missionaries were priests or religious that were sent into foreign lands. Today, it is you who are sent into our own land. When I got here at St. James, I mentioned I had a 3-tier program for the parish. First tier was revitalization. Bring us back to life, right? That was the first goal, to get the church renovated, get everything back together, the liturgy back together, get the religious ed back here, to bring it back to life, get our group, and we've done that. Phase 2, stabilization, get used to the new normal. And we did that during a pandemic. We got used to the new normal. And now comes the third phase. Perhaps I'm the one who plants and someone else is coming to sow. The third phase, and that is the phase of the re-evangelization of South Grafton and the Graftons. When they built this church, there were 800 people living in South Grafton. Now in the Graftons, there are 20,000 people living in the Graftons. Of those 20,000, probably only 2,000 who are of the Catholics are going to church, at most. That's a staggering low number, which means it's time for us to allow the Lord to light that fire underneath us, or to relight our hearts on fire in such a way that we can go forth and bring that fire of the gospel out there to draw souls back to church, back home to God, back home to the sacraments. And to those who are not Catholic, to invite them to become Catholic, to enter into the beauty of the RCIA program, to learn about the faith, to really be those people who are light of the world, salt of the earth, to not to be afraid to share our gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ with others. Our Lord told us not to be afraid, but to go forth and to proclaim the truth of his love. We have this beautiful gift of the treasure of the gospel, of the saving message of Christ. We can't hide it under a bushel basket. We can't bury this gift that the Lord has given to us. It's up to us to go forth and to share it, so that this mustard seed of St. James Parish, which has now been renewed, now been revived, has now become firm again, may blossom out and welcome into its branches all the birds out there, all the birds living in our town, that we might truly be the refuge where Christ is found, where Christ is fed upon, where Christ is loved, and where each soul may experience the intensity and the beauty of divine love. May God bless you, and Mary keep you.